Hare Krishna. Welcome, dear devotees. Thank you so much for joining us on the Vaishnavi Ministry page. And today we all have joined this particular page and this channel to celebrate this wonderful book, Bond of Love. This beautiful book has memories and interactions with Srila Prabhupada that has been shared by over 300 disciples of Srila Prabhupada, 300 Vaishnavi disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And we're so grateful that you have joined us. We have with us Her Grace Radha Prabhu. Radha Prabhu is the GBC Vaishnavi Minister. And she, in spite of her profession as an accomplished lawyer, she contributes so much to our society by helping women and conducting the affairs of the Vaishnavi Ministry. She has contributed so much in the field of domestic violence. So we're very, very grateful, Radha Prabhu, that you have joined us here. We have with us Visakha Prabhu. Visakha Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Visakha Prabhu does not need an introduction, and she's such a well-known devotee. But for my own purification, I want to share just a few things about Visakha Prabhu. Visakha Prabhu's book, 5 years, 11 months, is one of most dear books. I've read that a couple times, and I feel so close to Srila Prabhupada just reading that book. So you're in for a lot today. Fasten your seatbelts, because Visakha Prabhu and Radha Prabhu are going to take us down the memory lane of when Srila Prabhupada actually walked this planet. So we're very, very grateful that both of you have joined us, and we're really looking forward to hear so much from you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. Let me thank the Vaishnavi Ministry North America for putting together this series. It is so important that we hear from people, devotees who had personal association with Srila Prabhupada, and this book is an unprecedented opportunity to hear from the Vaishnavi disciples of Srila Prabhupada. So thank you also, Visakha Prabhu, for agreeing to this interview. I will echo Govinda Priya Prabhu and say that I have learned so much about Srila Prabhupada from your words. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's start maybe by discussing what was your hope in participating in the Bond of Love project? What did you kind of hope would come from the project?
Maybe I could just start with a short prayer to Prabhupada to kindly
Absolutely
bless our endeavor here. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskyata Deshatarane Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Well, thank you so much for inviting me to come on this program. I think, as you said, a bond of love is really a milestone for our movement. There have been many, many memoirs written about Prabhupada, but the vast majority of them are from the men's perspective, whereas the bond of love is very much from the woman's perspective. And reading through it, you really feel the relationship of the spiritual master with the disciple. And in trying to contribute to this project, I was so struck that Prabhupada's disciples are just extraordinary. And they're still extraordinarily attached to Srila Prabhupada after so many years after his departure. So that can become a big curiosity. How is it that they're so dedicated to Srila Prabhupada now 40, 50 years after he's left? So it was a kind of a discovery to find out that emotional bond that's so strong that it's driving them even today.
Do you think that Vaishnavis tend to have a different perspective on Srila Prabhupada than the men do?
Well, probably each individual has a little different perspective, but in general, it seems that looking at the memoirs, from the men's side, it's more Prabhupada was here and he did this. And the women's side, it's more, this is how I felt. This is what I experienced being in his presence. So for me, reading these collection of memoirs, it touched my heart very much.
Yeah. I had an experience once where I heard Bhakti Devi, Brahmatirtha's wife, speak about that first meeting with Srila Prabhupada, and it was exactly that difference that you mentioned. The book Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers focuses very much on the substance of what Srila Prabhupada was teaching, whereas Bhakti Prabhu's memories focused very much on the emotional reaction Srila Prabhupada evoked, and it did give me a whole different perspective on Srila Prabhupada. I'm glad that we can find that in this book as well.
And it's nice to have the well-rounded approach. You have the philosophy, but you also have the emotional reaction.
Yeah. How did Srila Prabhupada view traditional roles like motherhood, caretaking? Is that something that he showed in his treatment of Vaishnavis?
He very much valued traditional roles in terms of motherhood and caretaking. He expected the mothers to be responsible for their children. He wanted to see that the children weren't crying because they felt their mother's love, they felt their needs met, their mother's awareness of their presence and their requirements. So he was very supportive of that aspect of the tradition.
Did he take a personal interest in the children?
Totally. I mean, we just did a little presentation here in the UK about Saraswati, Malati and Shamsundar's daughter, and how attentive Prabhupada was to her and how loving he was to her. He would tease her and praise her and encourage her, pay attention to her. It was like she was his granddaughter. And not just her, but there are wonderful pictures and films of Prabhupada with the children on the lawn in front of Bhaktivedanta Manor and how he interacted with them. A very loving relationship. And he himself personally orchestrated giving out cookies to the children after the Bhagavatam class in Los Angeles and other places as well. At one point, one of his sannyas disciples thought Prabhupada must be tired, so I'll give out the cookies for him. And Prabhupada would not hear of that. Prabhupada himself wanted to give the cookies to each child individually.
Wow. That really does show that he appreciated the importance of those children. Yeah. Now, you've mentioned that the Vaishnavis kind of bring a different perspective on seeing Prabhupada. Do you think that Srila Prabhupada also showed a different side of himself to Vaishnavis?
I think on occasion he definitely did. He certainly encouraged his female disciples as far as deity worship, because women naturally want to create beauty. They love to work with very often they love to work with flowers and cloth, which is perfect for deity worship. So in the early days, the head pujaris were generally women, Shalavati, Jamuna, Maitahili. This was just very a woman's nature to beautify the Lord. And the women became so absorbed in that service, and the deities were gorgeous. Prabhupada was very pleased by so much of the service that the women did for the deities.
You mentioned before an incident where Prabhupada reciprocated with a devotee, a Vaishnavi Pujari, by giving her a donation. Could you share that with us?
Yes, well, we have her excerpt from the book. Should we take a moment to read that? Or a few moments? It's about a page. Okay. I think we can put it on the screen so our viewers can also read along with it. This is from Manjuwali Devi Dasi. Srila Prabhupada taught us how to wake up in the morning, shower, cleanse ourselves, eat, sing, dress, everything. and everything was focused around the divine, was a gift for the divine. We were a gift for the divine. Prabhupada gave the presence of God as his holy name, and we became purified every time we chanted the holy name. That name held the presence of God within us and radiated out such gifts. I didn't have a lot of association with Prabhupada, but that wasn't important. I loved deity worship, and my whole life, my every breath was absolutely absorbed in their service. My association with Srila Prabhupada was through deity worship in New Dwarka, because we serve the deities for him. He taught us to do everything with pure intention, beauty, grace, an open-hearted spirit, and as an offering. Our false ego had to step back. Every morning Prabhupada came in, the deity doors opened, and the Govindam prayers played. We addressed the deities and were fanning them with chamaras, and it was beyond time and space. Oh, the honor of doing that. Prabhupada would offer dandavats and move to the next altar. Then he'd sit on his Vyasasan, play his gong, and the doors would close for the offering. Once after class, Prabhupada said to Shrutakirti, "Who has dressed the deities?" "Manjuali." "Bring her to me immediately." "Prabhupada wants to see you immediately." I thought, oh my God. I trembled upstairs, my heart beating. What have I done? I went to Srila Prabhupada's room with its blue walls and saffron curtains. He'd told us those were the colors of his boyhood room. The light was shining through the curtains behind Srila Prabhupada, who was sitting on his little seat without his shirt, just his top piece, shiny silk dhoti and beautiful tilak. He had an effulgent aura and was smiling. His smile carried the whole universe. He said, "Thank you very much. You have done nicely. Krishna is looking beautiful, and I'm very pleased. When you decorate the deity, you decorate your heart," and gave me $20 for the deities. I said, "Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. This will go to the next outfit." He said, "Always serve Krishna, and this life will be perfect, and the next will be perfect for you. We'll go back to Godhead." I couldn't believe it. There was a pause and a presence without words that said everything. The little girl in me, the daughter of Srila Prabhupada, was being acknowledged and encouraged by his mercy, kindness, and generosity of spirit. That moment in time will always be with me. To please Prabhupada was our lifeblood because Prabhupada was everything to us. We were in love with him and his message. He was our gateway to a sweetness that we didn't know was available to us. He opened a container within us, and by his love gave us a jewel. And that jewel is something we can hardly speak about because it's so precious. Sometimes I don't honor it as much as I should, but I feel that jewel Prabhupada gave us was himself, his love, and his wisdom. Prabhupada could see the big picture and was 100% dedicated to the mission and lineage of Mahaprabhu and Krishna. My stories of Srila Prabhupada are few, but my love affair is deep. Sometimes I think the blessing is so great that we can always be honoring the story, holding its mystery in our hearts, an eternal moment in time. By some grace and blessing, a little hippie girl who was on the road looking for soul connection was picked up and given a jewel. We try to represent the integrity of the gift we've received, but the core of it is a heart connection. Srila Prabhupada touched our hearts, opened our minds, and gifted us with an unconstrained love. Ours is a living, fluid, ongoing relationship that takes focus, an open heart, and grace. It's a dance. It requires ongoing discipline to serve the relationship and not take it for granted. Prabhupada gave us the fellowship of a family of like-minded souls who are seeking a connection with the mystery of the divine. I'm deeply honored I could be part of the story. He touched my heart and captured me by his unconditional love.
Wow, that is beautiful.
Beautiful. It was hard to choose an excerpt. There's so many beautiful, beautiful remembrances, but Manjuali Prabhu is right in the middle, so it became there's so many before hers and so many after hers, but I would humbly suggest that everyone get a bond of love and relish pastimes like this and memories like this.
Yeah. One thing that really struck me about the passage you just read was she talks about a heart connection. And it seems that maybe that's at the heart of bhakti, isn't it? The connection with the Lord in the heart. Just so eloquently put. Thank you for sharing that. The example of Srila Prabhupada giving $20 to the Deity department it's intriguing. He was the leader, founder, charya of our movement. Certainly, there was a budget for Deity departments, and he could have instructed that the budget be increased. What do you think the meaning of that donation is?
Well, it's very personal. Our hope, our movement, as you say, it's a heart connection, and it's also very personal. So here we have, in this small pastime, we have the heart connection and we have the personal exchange. Prabhupada is taking from his own funds and giving to the head pujari to use in the service of the Lord, because he's so pleased by the way that she is serving.
Yeah, that is really beautiful. It also reminds us that, as the founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada had a very formal mood and activities, but he also saw himself as an individual devotee, and related to devotees in that way. So beautiful. Since we've, opened up the conversation to include other Vaishnavi's contributions, is there something in particular that you've learned from reading the other Vaishnavi stories in Bond of Love?
Well, I was overwhelmed by the diversity of the devotees that came to Prabhupada's lotus feet to serve him, and how each one is so extraordinary in their dedication and so individual. They have all these variegated talents that they bring, that Prabhupada engages surrounding Krishna's service, whether it's distributing books or cooking or raising the children, serving the deities, whatever it is, they become fully engaged. As Manjuali Prabhu said, she lived and breathed the deities. That was her life, all for Krishna's pleasure. And that was true also for the book distributors and the cooks and the mothers. We felt Prabhupada's centering on Krishna, and so we also, with that guidance, that inspiration, we also centered on Krishna.
Wow. It sounds like having Srila Prabhupada as the center really unified a diverse group of people. How important do you think that unity was in motivating devotees and helping them to continue service that often was performed under very austere conditions?
Well, it was very important. And again, to refer to Manjuali, she found in Prabhupada unconditional love. And when you find something so rare in this world, it enables you to do things you never thought you could do. You never even wanted to do. It never even occurred to you to do them. But that purity is so attractive, so compelling, that you simply want to put heart and soul into whatever it is in order to please this person who has unconditional love and who is so reciprocal with his disciples.
Yeah. Was there something in particular that you experienced along those lines, some uncongenial service or austerity that you were inspired to do for Srila Prabhupada?
Well, many devotees hear about the early days in India and they think, oh, it was so austere, it was so difficult, it must have been very challenging for you. And I heard Shamsundar Prabhu respond to that, and I really resonated with his response. He was saying we didn't even think of what we were doing as austerity. We were sleeping on mats. Very often we didn't have proper facility, prasadam. But for us, you know, as young people, you go out camping and it's very similar. But for us, we were doing it for a higher cause. We had an exalted goal. So besides the adventure side of it, when you add in this divine goal, and it never crossed my mind and Shamsundar Prabhu's mind and perhaps many others at that time, that this was austere. This was a great adventure. And we wouldn't have done anything else. We felt very fortunate to be part of it.
Yeah, yeah. You're speaking about a higher goal. Can you articulate what that goal was in your mind back then?
Well, it became very clear to all of us that Prabhupada was presenting a reality to us that was more real than the reality we were experiencing in our daily lives. He was presenting the spiritual world, which is a reality that goes on eternally, whereas everything in this world that we call real is destined to change, to disintegrate. And so when you have a glimpse of this reality that's so beautiful, that's so diverse, that's so full of fun and excitement, I mean, that becomes a goal that is irresistible. You just can't wait to get closer and closer to that goal. And with Prabhupada experiencing that reality in a daily, moment-to-moment way, it became something tangible. It was actually something, gee, I can do that. Look, here's a person that did it. You know, maybe I can do it too. He's tasting that reality that's real.
Yeah, having a living example of, you know, the benefits, the rewards of the bhakti practice must have been very inspiring. How do you think devotees today can, you know, get a glimpse of that other world, that inspiration you were able to tap into in Srila Prabhupada's presence?
Well, I think certainly part of it is absorbing ourselves in his teachings, meaning his books, his lectures, his conversations, his letters, especially his books, because that is the reality that he's transporting us to if we will simply allow that. So as he gave so much time, sacrificed so much to give us these books, so we reciprocate with that by reading them, by trying to absorb them, by discussing them and rereading them. So that's certainly one way. And another way is to absorb ourselves in Prabhupada himself as part of the spiritual world, as one of Krishna's associates. And by seeing, you know, just like in the early part of the Gita, Arjuna asks about a transcendentalist. How does he walk? How does he speak? How does he live? So by looking into Prabhupada's life, we can see how a transcendentalist walks and talks and lives his life. And that can be a great source of inspiration for us.
Yeah. Do you think it's important for devotees, every devotee, to have a relationship with Prabhupada?
I definitely think so. Prabhupada is the founder acharya of our movement. And for our movement to remain intact over time, we need to be in touch with our founder acharya. And he is accessible to all of us. He made himself accessible to all of us. We simply have to reach out to access him. We have to make the effort to access him.
Yeah. I know for me personally, I've had a couple of dreams about Srila Prabhupada and received instructions from him in dreams. And, you know, I don't feel like it was some special visitation. I feel like, you know, everyone can receive instruction from Prabhupada. But just that interaction in a dream, and it may be totally a mental concoction, you know, on my part, but it is inspiring. It does help to feel that Srila Prabhupada personally cares about each one of us.
And it's not just a thought. He does care about each one of us.
Yeah, yeah. So what are some of the qualities of Srila Prabhupada that have helped inspire you to keep serving him for so many years?
Well, certainly his dedication to his spiritual master, certainly his purity, that there was never any question that his entire focus was to bring us to Krishna in whatever way, shape, or form that he could. And in doing that, he created a whole culture for us. You know, he gave us friends. He taught us about family life and gave us families. He gave us ways that we could use our existing skills in Krishna's service and his service. And he gave us so many challenges so that we could try to increase our skills. So it became quite an exciting lifestyle, and I dread to think what my life would have been had Prabhupada not entered it, because he really changed the whole trajectory of my life by introducing this amazing culture of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah. Do you feel that there's something about your experience as a Vaishnavi in ISKCON that is valuable and unique as opposed to experiences you might have had in a man's body?
Well, certainly we went through a phase, and perhaps we're still going through a phase in ISKCON, where women are not given as much facility or opportunity for service as perhaps Prabhupada envisioned or wanted. And so that can be challenging for women. That's an extra obstacle for women. And so to tolerate that, to try to work around it, to try to improve the situation, those are certainly things that men don't face. And if it's done in the proper consciousness, it can help us become stronger in Krishna consciousness.
Yeah. You said something about challenges helping develop skills. Is that how you sometimes see this extra burden on Vaishnavis in ISKCON?
Well, certainly there's so many statements about women in the scriptures and in Prabhupada's purports that can be misconstrued. And so it obliges us to think about those very carefully in line with Prabhupada's example, in line with his activities. And to try to understand them in that context puts them in a different frame, which is not at all a negative frame, but actually a frame where we can grow within it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because sometimes we hear that when it comes to the treatment of women, we should just take what's in Prabhupada's books, and the individual instructions he gave in letters or in conversations aren't really relevant to anyone except the individual he was dealing with. Can you sum up the perspective that you think we gain from looking at all of Srila Prabhupada's teachings, whether written or oral, personal, or, for society at large? Is there a different framework, or what is it that helps us see about Prabhupada's instructions in general, or as applies to Vaishnavis?
I think it's something we touched on previously, that Srila Prabhupada took each and every person as an individual and tried to help them grow individually according to their propensities, their personalities, their skills. So this idea of lumping people together according to some bodily designation is not the example that I saw. And I don't think it's a helpful example. Rather, take each person and see what can this person do to glorify Krishna and to grow spiritually. And that was the example I very much felt from Srila Prabhupada. That may lead to traditional roles, may lead to a woman being a mother and cooking and so forth, or it may lead to very untraditional roles. And Prabhupada accommodated both. He did not stereotype, he did not put us in boxes or some sort of cookie cutter situation where we had to be like this because we were in this body. But he let it breathe. There was flexibility there because it was so personal.
Yeah. I guess, sometimes we're conditioned by impersonalism and we don't necessarily realize it. But when we lump people together, it's kind of the impersonalist mentality coming from that every devotee in this category is exactly the same as every other devotee in that category.
Well, it's also easier. You don't have to think as much. You don't have to make as much effort. Someone comes with X body, you put them in X box. If they come with Y body, you put them in Y box.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Psychological studies have actually determined that that's one of the reasons why people hold racial prejudice, for example, because it is a shortcut to having to figure out who the person really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Laziness.
Yeah. So one thing I'm really getting strongly from you is that Prabhupada personalized the experience of bhakti yoga for his disciples, that it was not a blanket prescription, but it was a carefully cultivated medical, spiritual health program that was tailored to the individual.
Yes.
That really speaks to Prabhupada's love and care for each devotee.
And I think we can add to that he personally encouraged the individuals, as we saw with Manjuali Prabhu, that he calls her into his room and says, the deities are so beautiful. I'm so pleased. Here's a donation for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, it's really an act of love. Yeah.
It's an act of love. And she became bound to him by love.
Right.
Therefore, the book is called A Bond of Love.
Bond of love, yeah. And I guess that's a bond that is much harder to break than some of the other reasons we become attached to people.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, you were just describing how women can have traditional roles. They can, do non-traditional things. And it struck me that you yourself have done both. That you have been a wife, you've been a mother, you've cooked and cleaned and done all those wonderful caretaking activities. And at the same time, right now, you're serving as a temple president. Do you feel there's any conflict between those roles?
Well, no, when I was a mother to young children, I really tried to focus on them and give my attention to them. So prior to that, I did a lot of traveling for photography. But as our children were growing up, I really tried to not travel so much or travel with them. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, they're grown up. We have a grandson. So now their lives are complete. So now I can try to function in this new challenge of temple. They call me temple president here. So, a lot to learn. Learning as I go. It's definitely a fresh challenge.
Do you feel like there are lessons from motherhood that you learned that are helpful in this new service?
Oh, definitely. I mean, if motherhood doesn't teach you patience and tolerance, nothing. Nothing.
Are those important qualities for someone who's called a temple president?
I think so, at least. Yes, I think so.
Yeah. There's a question that someone posted. How did Srila Prabhupada see woman and child protection in ISKCON?
Well, Srila Prabhupada himself was very conscious that the women had the facility that they needed. You'll find pastimes in the Bond of Love where the devotees were in Vrindavan. They went on parikrama, and the bus with the women got stuck in the sand or some such thing, and the women were trapped. And so all the men returned to the temple, and Prabhupada said, "Where are the women?" None of the men noticed the women were missing, except Srila Prabhupada. And he sent out a stream of taxis looking for the women who were with this abandoned bus. So that's one example. And there are others also. I mean, Kaushalya Prabhu tells them that Prabhupada was conscious that the women need proper facility. The men can sleep outside, but the women would sleep in the room, and so forth.
Yeah. Did Prabhupada limit Vaishnavis' activities in the name of protecting them?
Well, he was asked at one point, can a woman be temple president? And his response was, yes, why not? And then he went on to say how women should be protected. So some men read that and say, well, Prabhupada didn't really want women to be temple president because women have to be protected. But Prabhupada didn't say that. He said a woman can be temple president and she should be protected. So they can both go together. They're not contradictory. Mm-hmm. I think we have to broaden our understanding of what is protection to accommodate what Prabhupada is telling us.
Yeah. Broaden our understanding of protection in what way?
Well, ultimately, protection means that you are free to serve Krishna according to your propensity. That is the best kind of protection because that enables you to grow spiritually. Mm-hmm. So the opposite of that would be to say, you can't do this because of some designation that you have, because that can really frustrate a person, that they have skills that are dormant within them that they can't use in Krishna's service. Mm-hmm. They can do other things, certainly, but to use the gifts that Krishna has given you is like giving those gifts to him. He's given them to you. It's an exchange. It's reciprocation. And for someone to say, to stop that is a lack of protection. So to facilitate people's propensities, their skills, their talents in the service of the Lord, in the service of Srila Prabhupada is the best kind of protection. And as Manjuali, again, to quote her, she became so absorbed, you don't get distracted by things. When you're really using all everything you love to do, you're doing for Krishna, you're not distracted. And that is actual protection.
Yeah. Yeah, I was recently reflecting on the purport in the Bhagavad Gita to the verse where Arjuna is describing how women can become degraded if they're not, if the men are not there to protect them. And I noticed for the first time that Srila Prabhupada actually said that the elders should engage the women in service, and that is part of protecting them. So I don't know how that escaped me for so many years, but it's right there. It's right there.
It's the magic of Prabhupada's books.
Yeah, yeah. There's always something new. Yeah. Okay. So Shamasaki has a question. Why do you think it is hard for us to dedicate fully to this goal, to serve and also protect our lives now? Why is it difficult for us to do this now, which was so easy for you all to do? Is it because we're not receiving the same love?
I'm not sure it was so easy for us to do. It may have looked like it was easy, but the devotees stepped out of their comfort zone, whatever that comfort zone may have been, and stepped into an entirely new life. And it wasn't always smooth, I would say, in terms of relationships, in terms of what we were going through physically. But we were excited and we wanted it so much. Perhaps that urgency is lacking, or the intensity is lacking, because certainly Prabhupada brought that with him. Even though we were young and full of energy, he impressed upon us that life is flickering, which is something many of us hadn't really considered seriously. Yeah. And with that kind of reflection, we just poured ourselves into his movement. So, yeah, I think there are probably many complex reasons for that. Certainly one of them being Prabhupada's sense of the necessity of doing this now. And we all felt that, I would say, all of us, all over the world, wherever Prabhupada was, it didn't matter, but we all felt we need to do this now. We can't wait.
Yeah. And was that in part because you realized that Prabhupada might leave at some point?
No, I never thought that Prabhupada would leave us. I thought he would be there forever. It never occurred to me. I think it came because of his sense of urgency was transferred to us somehow or other. It's a bit mystical, but somehow we all felt the sense of urgency. So people would be on Hari Nam all day. They'd be distributing books all day, serving the deities, whatever it was. We just poured ourselves into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that's something we can recapture today, or is that maybe not sustainable over the course of the centuries that ISKCON will continue to grow?
I think it can be recaptured in pockets. Certainly when we have festivals, the Mayapur festival, we're all there together. We feel that sense of unity, and we're doing something so glorious, and we're so privileged to be doing it, that I think that comes back, that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of brings up obliquely brings up an important point that, there's something about the unity and working with devotees and bringing everyone together that is energizing and that helps our spiritual lives.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Therefore, we're asked to go on pilgrimage to India regularly to rejuvenate ourselves spiritually.
Yeah. Yeah. And festivals have a function in inspiring us and bringing a community together as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, another question. What is one thing about women, if asked, would you like to change and bring it back to what it was when Srila Prabhupada was alive? If there was one thing you could change about women's situation in ISKCON today, to bring it back to the past, what would it be?
Well, I would like to see that not just women, but everyone who comes to Srila Prabhupada's movement is engaged according to their propensities and encouraged in that engagement and facilitated and trained if necessary. Because again, that's the way you get this absorption and enthusiasm and feeling, I want to give myself fully to this service and to this mission. So the idea of being very personal with each and every candidate that comes and befriending that person and giving them all facility and all appreciation on their journey.
Okay. Sometimes we think that what you're describing, this personal approach, specific individual engagement, is something that they, leaders of the movement should be doing. But are we also as individuals responsible for that? And how can we participate in welcoming each devotee on an individual basis?
I think you and your husband are great examples of that. You had for years and years, and probably to today, I don't know, you have gatherings in your home where you have discussions and you get to know people individually and engage them in Krishna's service in some way or other, yeah?
Yeah, I will use my husband's favorite line about preaching. It's just be nice. Sometimes we forget how powerful that can be.
It's perfect.
Yeah. And maybe that goes back to that sharing Prabhupada with others, bringing his mood forward. Do you have any thoughts on that, about how we share Prabhupada with new people or with each other?
Well, I think one of the ways is this a bond of love. If we just read a little bit of this, it's hard to read just a little bit. You really get caught up in it. And I found you keep going, reading more and more. It's hard to put down. But, and then sharing those beautiful pastimes, those beautiful remembrances, and this heart connection that we're speaking about, because that is the lasting bond, perhaps more than what he did where, but the way that we felt about what he did, the way it impacted us and continued to impact us.
Yeah. And as you said earlier in the conversation, that maybe is an aspect that has been not as well highlighted in our picture of Srila Prabhupada up till now. So,
yes.
Yeah. Now, you said something in your excerpt, your story, your pastime that you shared for Bond of Love about Prabhupada and tradition imbued with bhakti. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, what that means.
Well, what I was trying to convey with that was that when tradition served the Krishna conscious mission, when it helped people become Krishna conscious, Prabhupada would embrace that tradition. And if tradition became more ritualistic and was not assisting people in their growth in spiritual life, Prabhupada would not pay attention to that tradition. So it was very much the filter, the discernment was very much based on what will help people come closer to Krishna. If the tradition did that, go for it. We love the tradition, we embrace it. And if it didn't, we put it aside with all due respect.
Okay. Do you have an example of what you mean, or what he did?
I was using my own example that I was traveling with Prabhupada as his photographer for some time through the U.S., in Europe, and in India. And sometimes my husband was there. He was filming Yadabara Prabhu. And in the U.S., he wasn't there for much of the journey. So it means that I was without my husband, with Srila Prabhupada and his secretary and his servant, traveling from here to there on airplanes and cars, whatever it was. And that is very untraditional. You won't find that in the tradition.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Prabhupada accommodated it because it was helping me come closer to him, come closer to Krishna. And through my service, we have many photographs that we otherwise may not have had. So it was also helping the movement. So tradition was put aside in that case to facilitate the Krishna conscious mission.
Wow. Yeah. What would you say to devotees who feel that, well, Prabhupada had the realization to do that, to dispense with tradition and understand when it could be set aside, but how can we, as fallen conditioned souls, how can we take the same responsibility for doing something that is non-traditional?
Yeah, it's best to be cautious in such circumstances for sure. But at the same time, we don't want to become so cautious that we become rigid. People are not attracted to rigidity. And people who may have come to Krishna consciousness may be turned off by the rigidity. So we need to proceed with caution and with care, but also with the example of Prabhupada before us, that there are times and places and circumstances where this is allowable.
Yeah. That touches on a question that just really I have been wrestling with recently. And because I have a platform, I'm going to ask it right now, which is sometimes we are so afraid to do something because we feel like if we get it wrong, we will have ruined spiritual life for a number of people. Is it okay mistakes in setting up the organization of our movement, and while we strive to avoid all mistakes, is it okay to take some risk that we might be doing the wrong thing?
Well, risk is almost inevitable, but we want to have intelligent risk. We don't want to have foolish risk. Okay. And we are fortunate now that we have many, many seniors in our movement, those people that have been through quite a bit. And most of them are very open to sharing their wisdom. So if we are moving in an area that's unknown to us, it may be known to others. And I think it would be intelligent and prudent to approach those people that we respect, that have been through something similar, and get their feedback so that we reduce the chance of mistake.
Yeah. Emphasizing again that need for community and interaction and, and working together. Yeah. Now there was another question. I'm just going to try to find it. Yeah. There's a question about the presentation about Saraswati that you mentioned. Devotees want to know if that's available somewhere, if they can access that.
Yes, if you go to the Bhaktivedanta Manor website, I think it's called krishnatemple.com, but if you just put in Google Bhaktivedanta Manor, Then there's a page that is accessible from that site, which is Winter Meditations. It's called Winter Meditations. So her video is, I think it's the first one now. There are 5 or 6 videos, short. They're very short, 2 minutes. But one is devoted to Saraswati Devi Dasi.
Nice. And while we're talking about, Vaishnavis raised in ISKCON, how did you or how do you help your daughters fully express their service for Krishna consciousness, their service in Krishna consciousness within ISKCON? Were there challenges that were unique to raising Vaishnavis?
Well, there were occasions where I was made very uncomfortable by something that was said or done in the presence of my daughters. At that time, they were very young, so they weren't really affected by it, although I was very affected. So I would always try to be in a place where people were more open-minded. So that was one thing. And then my husband and I tried to encourage them in whatever ways they went as far as their interests and skills, and support them in that.
Yeah. Do you feel like they developed a relationship with Srila Prabhupada?
I think to some extent they did. I think it's going to grow as they grow.
Yeah. I guess that.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a really good point, that our relationship with Prabhupada does not have to be static and probably shouldn't be static.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do we foster, how do we grow that relationship? Do you have any advice on that point?
Well, you can begin by reading A Bond of Love, Srila Prabhupada's daughters.
Definitely.
Not just reading it, but discussing it also with others and telling others about the pastimes, just as we discussed Manjuali Prabhu's pastimes. And then certainly reading, as I mentioned, trying to put time aside every day, even just a little time, to read Prabhupada's books regularly. Really make that part of our daily rhythm. It's so important. And to hear him also. I find it such a solace to hear Prabhupada speaking philosophy classes or morning walks.
Yeah. And we have so much of that available right now.
So much.
I remember years ago how we would, hoard our little cassette tapes so carefully because you never knew if you could replace them if they got lost or damaged. And now, it's all available through the miracle of the internet.
We're indebted to the Bhaktivedanta archives for making it available and transcribing all the lectures, and there's a huge amount of work.
Yeah. To the extent that you had a personal realization or a personal instruction from Srila Prabhupada, is there something that you'd like to share with the Vaishnavis?
A pastime, you're saying?
Like a pastime or an instruction or...
Well, I was photographing Prabhupada in Juhu on his morning walks. It was a very beautiful time of day. From 6 to 7, he would walk along the broad beach, the white beach, firm sand, and he would walk very briskly. And every morning he went. I don't think he missed a single morning. So one morning at 6, it was still dark out, and I was waiting for him to come with my camera. And as I waited, I was sitting cross-legged chanting my japa with my japa bag. And he came very, very gently so that I didn't hear him at all. And he passed about 6 inches from me and glanced at me and said, "Thank you very much." And I thought, what's he thanking? I'm just sitting here. But then I thought, no, I'm chanting Hare Krishna. And that's what his instruction was for all of the followers to chant Hare Krishna. Wow. So I took that not just for me, but I think Srila Prabhupada is chanting all his followers, thanking all his followers for following that basic instruction of chanting Hare Krishna.
And sometimes we think we need to do really big things to please Srila Prabhupada or our own gurus. And I guess maybe that pastime highlights that it's simple things done with real sincerity and determination maybe are the most powerful. Yeah. If you had a chance to see Prabhupada in person one more time, what would you tell him?
I'm not sure I would tell him anything. I would probably like to hear from him.
Oh.
Perhaps inquire from him how we can improve in his movement, what he would like to see us doing differently or doing better.
Yeah. You know, that actually brings up a point that Srila Prabhupada was always trying to increase and improve. Did that ever feel like a burden to you, that he was constantly looking for more from his devotees?
Well, I mean, that side was there, but also we just had the side where he was so grateful for even the simplest things his devotees did. Mm-hmm. So both sides were there. The complete pleasure and satisfaction and nourishment that he conveyed to us. He was pleased by our simple activities of chanting Hare Krishna and so forth. And at the same time, he did want more, but you felt the balance because we were rooted in the basic principles. And then from those strong roots, then yes, certainly you want to grow as much as you can. But Prabhupada himself did not encourage over-endeavor. In fact, he discouraged us from over-endeavor. You have to get the balance. You don't want to be lethargic on one side. You don't want to over-endeavor in the other. There's something in the middle.
Yeah. I think that idea of balance is one of the hardest things in spiritual life. Do you have anything to share on that? Is there a way that you find balance in your life?
Well, I love to look at Prabhupada's example that although we know he slept very little, he did get the sleep that he needed. And he was careful with his diet. He would tell his cooks what he wanted. And he got exercise every day. And he was very regulated to the point that if you knew what time it was in the time zone he was in, you knew what he was doing. Now he's having lunch, now he's resting, now he's meeting with guests and devote like that. So that to me is the example of a balanced life. We can't imitate him in terms of how much sleep. We need to get the sleep that our body requires. But the idea of being regulated and doing basic activities in a daily way without fail, this can really give us strength moving forward.
Wow. Simple things, but they can be very powerful. Yeah. I want to let you know that there have been a number of comments thanking you for sharing your realizations, but also for the photographs which you've taken over the years, for the work on the Hare Krishna movement movie, and for your writings, which have inspired so many devotees in so many ways. So I'll share that with you. I think we have...
Well, can I thank you for taking on the responsibility of the Vaishnavi Ministry? I was so happy when you stepped into that role, and I think you're doing it with aplomb and grace and effectiveness. So we are all indebted to you very much, not just the ladies, but the men also.
You know, it's by the mercy of you and the other Vaishnavi disciples of Srila Prabhupada that I've been able to be engaged. And it's great mercy on me because otherwise my mind with nothing to do would just be a rascal mind the way it usually is. So, thank you. And I think we're ending at 10. I think we have just a few seconds left. And I want to know if there's any last thought you'd want to share.
Well, I wanted to thank all the Vaishnavis for participating in this exceptional, unique, transcendental movement. And thank you very much. It's certainly a step out of the ordinary, out of the mundane, and it's a step towards this sweetness that is so precious and so valuable and accessible by Prabhupada's mercy.
All right.
Thank you so much, Visakha Prabhu.
Thank you.
This conversation was so beautiful, insightful. And, you know, as the two of you were having this conversation, it was almost like you were opening different layers and revealing Srila Prabhupada in his different, you know, it's just every time you hear different devotees talk about Srila Prabhupada, they bring about so many different qualities of Srila Prabhupada that's so touching. And we're almost seeing Srila Prabhupada through your eyes. We're so very grateful. And I want to thank all our viewers for your active participation, your comments, your support to the Vaishnavi Ministry. We have posted the link to the Bond of Love. You can purchase the book. If you don't have a copy, this is a must. Please get a copy. And this book was not meant to make profit. This book was just a humble offering and sharing of all Srila Prabhupada's daughters. Their interactions, their experiences, it's just so beautiful. And like Visakha Prabhu so beautifully said, you just can't read a little bit. So thank you all very much. Thank you so much, Visakha Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Radha Dasi.
Thank you, Visakha Prabhu, Govinda Priya.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare